floor to His Excellency Mr. Bogdan Aurescu.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, I would like to thank the Maltese Presidency and my colleague Minister Borg for this invitation to brief the Council on a highly topical subject, sea level rise and its security implications. I'm speaking today as a member of the International Law Commission and co-chair of its study group on sea level rise in relation to international law, but also as Foreign Minister of Romania. I would like to inform you that in preparing this intervention, I have consulted my colleagues co-chairs of the study group, Professor Soral from Turkey, Galvao Teles from Portugal, and Ruda Santolaria from Peru. My message today is clear. Sea level rise, which is a direct negative effect of climate change, has obvious implications on security and stability around the world. It creates global problems affecting the international community as a whole, therefore requiring global solutions. That is why the UN is rightfully at the forefront of the efforts to address its consequences, to find appropriate solutions, and prevent the associated risks of international conflict. Sea level rise poses a real risk to over 2/3 of UN member states, which are likely to be affected directly or indirectly. The science is clear on this, as shown by the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports with regard to the alarming projections of sea level rise. Indeed, a growing number of expert assessments conclude that this phenomenon presents mounting hazards for human and state security. The negative national and international security implications and consequences linked to sea level rise include affecting the coasts, which because of this phenomenon are pushed landward, and therefore affecting the baselines, their actual position being likely impacted by the physical changes of the coast's positioning and configuration, and the maritime zones that are measured from the baselines, territorial sea, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, thus threatening the coastal states' entitlements to these areas and the access to the resources therein. This loss of resources on which the littoral populations depend for their sustenance is likely to prompt increased competition over natural resources, and together with a deterioration of living conditions, also forced migration and displacement of these populations. Sea level rise can also impact the coastal military installations and critical infrastructure. And most importantly, it can prompt the loss of state territory. Indeed, sea level rise is an existential threat for low-lying coastal states, and especially for small island developing states, which may consider their statehood and sovereignty in danger, as their land surface may be totally covered by the sea or become fully uninhabitable. What are our options when dealing with the security implications of sea level rise? This phenomenon needs at the same time policy changes and legal changes. We need to react quickly and efficiently, including by using all political, legal, and institutional tools provided under the UN framework. Since the state's coasts are the first to be affected by sea level rise, there are at least two options of action to protect the coasts, and thus the state territory, its population and their rights, the maritime zones and their resources, in a word, the affected states' interests and rights. One such course of action is to physically protect the coast through coastal fortifications and consolidation. But this is highly costly, and small island developing states and many low-lying coastal states simply cannot afford these costs. The international community must find innovative instruments to support such efforts. Last September, during the high-level event Staying Ahead of the Curve, Climate Security and International Law, organized by Germany and Palau in New York in the margins of the General Assembly High-Level Week, I made the proposal of creating an international voluntary fund for this purpose, and I renew this proposal today. The second option is the use of international law, taking into account the needs and appeals from member states, as well as the fact that sea level rise effects represent a pressing concern of the international community as a whole. The International Law Commission promptly included, upon the proposal of the current co-chairs of the study group, the topic sea level rise in relation to international law on its active agenda in 2019. This was followed already in 2020 by the elaboration and presentation of a first issues paper, which I co-authored together with Nilufer Oral, focusing on the law of the sea aspects related to sea level rise, which generated ample and fruitful debates in the ILC in 2021 and in the Sixth Committee in 2020 and 2021. In 2022, a second issues paper was presented by the other two co-chairs of the study group, being dedicated to statehood and protection of persons affected by sea level rise. It was thoroughly debated last year within the ILC and the Sixth Committee. And as we speak, Professor Oral and I are finalizing an additional paper to the first issues paper, which focuses on certain important aspects also related to the law of the sea, thus developing the analysis from the first issues paper. What legal solutions can be shaped? As far as the law of the sea aspects, it is obvious that for all states affected by sea level rise, the maritime zones established under UNCLOS are central to their economies, food security, health, and to their livelihoods. Therefore, the concept of legal stability, security, certainty, and predictability in relation to maritime zones is of paramount importance. The additional paper we are working on is focusing inter alia on this essential concept. One option to ensure this much-needed security was already proposed by the co-chairs in the 2020 first issues paper and endorsed by states from various regions of the world, as evidenced by the submissions to the ILC and by the quite large number of statements presented in the Sixth Committee, but also by the collective regional and cross-regional declarations, such as the August 2021 Declaration on Preserving Maritime Zones in the Face of Climate Change-Related Sea Level Rise, of the 18 Pacific Islands Forum members, and the September 2021 Declaration of the 39 heads of state and government of the Alliance of Small Island States. This possible solution refers to the interpretation of UNCLOS that there is no obligation under this treaty to keep baselines and outer limits of maritime zones under review, nor to update charts or lists of geographical coordinates once deposited with the UN Secretary General, and that such maritime zones and the rights and entitlements that flow from them shall continue to apply without reduction, notwithstanding any physical changes prompted by sea level rise. In other words, preserving or fixing or freezing the baselines and outer limits of maritime zones is crucial to the legal stability and security, thus allowing for safeguarding the rights of the affected states with respect to their maritime zones. At the same time, as analyzed in the 2020 first issues paper and its 2023 additional paper, and supported by the member states in their submissions to the ILC and statements before the Sixth Committee, legal stability and security mean that sea level rise cannot be invoked in accordance with the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties as a fundamental change of circumstances for terminating or withdrawing from a treaty which established a maritime boundary, since maritime boundaries enjoy the same regime of stability as any other boundaries. Such possible options are perfectly in line with the need to preserve the integrity of UNCLOS and the balance of rights and obligations included therein. They are also in line with the mandate of the study group, which provides that this ILC topic will not propose modifications to existing international law, such as UNCLOS. Beyond the law of the sea aspects of sea level rise, another part of the urgent answer to be given by the international community must be to address the increasing humanitarian consequences. I do believe that global solidarity is key here. We have the duty to prevent situations in which vulnerable countries have to choose between responding to climate change and their own development. In order to avoid possible situations of de facto statelessness, we can have in mind a few measures: preserving the fundamental rights and the conservation of the identity of persons that are compelled to settle on the territory of third states as a result of such phenomenon, safeguarding the rights of the affected states with respect to their cultural heritage, preserving the right to self-determination of the affected populations, and enabling through international cooperation the granting of financial and technical support to the affected states when exercising their rights to preserve their own existence. The impact on local populations, which is the human face of sea level rise, is already quite visible in the most vulnerable areas. For such populations, solutions should be based on international cooperation between affected states, third states, and international organizations and other relevant stakeholders. Vulnerable groups such as women, children, the elderly, and indigenous populations are likely to suffer the most. It is also crucial to involve local populations in the decision-making process relating to their possible relocation. Without such measures, the impact on the human rights of affected populations and the displacement internally or cross-border of such populations have the potential to cause instability and conflict, and to constitute a threat to peace and security. Also, since territory has long been considered one of the requirements for statehood, the submerging of land poses obvious threats for the territorial integrity of states and even for their existence. This is a novel situation for international law, and the possible legal implications should be assessed accordingly. Mr. Secretary General, you have mentioned already some of the solutions. The 2022 second issues paper, as well as the last year debate dedicated to it in the ILC, examined in detail past or present experiences or situations based on which such legal options might be identified. But the possible international law options are not limited to the ILC work. The advisory opinion already requested in December to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, and the one under preparation for ICJ following the initiative of Vanuatu, which is also supported by Romania and other states, can bring more light to the legal implications of climate change, including from the perspective of sea level rise. These are some of the avenues that are being explored or can be further explored in order to identify the most appropriate legal options to deal effectively with sea level rise effects. These endeavors could encourage a higher level of ambition for climate action in the future. Before closing, let me reassure you of my country's full commitment to continue to be part of the global efforts in addressing the risks that climate change in general and sea level rise in particular pose around the world. I encourage the Security Council to stay actively involved in these efforts due to its serious implications for international peace and security. The topic of sea level rise should remain in the Council's attention. I am sure that together, in solidarity, we will find the right solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.